So basically doing the live thing. Oh, it says it's recording instantly. Well, that's different. Okay, awesome. Welcome everybody to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host, Samantha Studebaker-Carl, here broadcasting to you from beautiful Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm here with my good friends Jason and Catherine and Christopher and Christina and Karen. And I'm sure we may have other people jumping on in the middle of this this discussion. But before we get going, let's talk about what we're going to talk about. First of all, our topic for today is be mindful of the energy you're putting out into the world. And we're discussing that because we're talking about verse 30 of the Tao Te Ching as interpreted in the book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. And for those of you who are participating in this live conference, then you can unmute yourself. If you've joined via the video link and you're actually in the conference room, you'll see down in the bottom left corner, there's an option to unmute your audio or unmute your video so we can see you if you'd like. And then if you're joining via conference call, then you can hit star 6 to unmute and then mute yourself again. And just kind of a reminder to everybody is that when somebody else is talking, just make sure to keep yourself muted. And then if you'd like to jump out, just unmute yourself and say, hey, I got something to say, and then you can jump in. Okay, so while so I'm going to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. So Jason, why don't you go ahead and start, and then we'll jump into this topic.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. It's great to be here. I'm Jason from Florida, and it is really great to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Good morning, this is Catherine Clement in Boulder, Colorado, and loving the Zooms, and I'm so glad that you're with us here, Karen, and I look forward to hearing your voice again.
Good morning, all. Christina Urban here from Northeast Tennessee. Good to see you.
I could introduce myself as Bland. This is funny seeing a little cutout top with the round thing for a head, and that's me. I live in Chandler, Arizona, and it's 7 o'clock in the morning here. And I don't know how you people do things later in the day. I mean, by the time 8 or 9 comes along, I'm so balled up and stuff, I couldn't even find my way out of my browser. So congrats to y'all. I'm eager for what we're going to do.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen. Chris, do you have audio this week? You want to message us and let us know, or are you going to try and jump on via call or so we can hear you? Jump out if you can. If you can't, then no audio and maybe. Okay, all right. He says he doesn't have any audio, but he might jump on via call. Okay, cool. So let's talk about the Tao Te Ching Verse 30. And who wants to read this verse? Jason, you want to read it this week? You got it?
Yeah, I can do that. Sure.
Right. Awesome.
Okay. One who would guide a leader of men in the uses of life will warn him against the use of arms for conquest. Weapons often turn upon the wielder. Where armies settle, nature offers nothing but briars and thorns. After a great battle has been fought, the land is cursed, the crops fail, the earth lies stripped of its motherland. After you have attained your purpose, you must not parade your success. You must not boast of your ability. You must not feel proud. You must rather regret that you had not been able to prevent the war. You must never think of conquering others by force. Whatever strains with force will soon decay. It is not attained in the way, not being attuned to the way, its end comes all too soon. That's verse 30.
Thank you, Jason. So what did you guys think about that verse? What was the first thing that came up for you? Who wants to jump out first?
Well, I thought it was pretty fitting with just the way the world is today. Just with everything that's going on overseas, as well as, you know, in America, it's so fitting with all of the chaos and the lack of compassion in our even in our political arena. And so when I read it, I was again very thankful because I got another verse that I understood. So I celebrated that, but then I really thought how fitting it is. And it reminded me of a discussion that I had over a year ago when I was in another book club and like membership, and we were talking about what it would be like if there was enough compassion around the world. And once we started to be able to give that compassion to ourselves, then we would be able to affect our environment and enlarge the world. I think I'm interested to see what everybody else is saying, but I agree with what the verse was talking about, but I think that it goes way too extreme too. So I'm interested to see what everybody thinks about that.
Yeah, I'll jump out real quick. I think it speaks a lot to diplomacy, you know, that, you know, and to communication. You know, it's funny, we have all these ways of connecting with people these days. However, it seems like most of us lack the ability to communicate effectively, you know, or even receive that communication effectively. And I think a lot of our issues could be, you know, solved, if not made easier, if we all learn, you know, learn how to communicate better and learn how to depend on diplomacy, and rather than, you know, wanting to lash out and just make people do what we'd like them to do or think like we want them to think. So, you know, it's important to communicate, and I think that's one of the things it's talking about, is to, you know, put down the weapons and instead try to you know, try to communicate and see things from a different perspective, and maybe come together where we have commonalities. So, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's very. Of course, I mean, if you read the blog post, you know, I can get with you on that. But here's the thing, like, I really want us to get into this conversation too, because something that's driving me crazy in the environment today is this notion that civility and compassion is politically correct and therefore wrought with dishonesty and cynicism. And for me, I'm just talking for me here. I am just disgusted and sick of this notion that just because I am civil and willing to hear, you know, your side of things, Jason, your side of things, Catherine Smith, and Catherine, Karen, that means in any way that I am being PC or that I'm lying to you or I'm trying to snow you or anything like that. I don't understand this notion that we have to be just rude jerks to communicate. So I just wonder what you guys think about that. I guess the fine line that I'm clearly missing here.
I believe I agree with you there, Christina. I mean, it's you know, the idea of being politically correct has kind of a negative you know, effect on people's communications, because you know, even if you are being politically correct, then they might have a negative idea about that in their own head, and it's muddying the communication between you two, On the other hand, if you are being if you aren't being politically correct, that might also be muddying the communication. So, and that's so how we receive things is also important. We shouldn't get hung up on. We should be careful to not get hung up on one idea that the person says, but to hear them out. But I think that was kind of what you're getting at, right? I mean, but I agree with you. What else were you saying about that?
Well, you hit a point that I kind of wanted to bring out, but I didn't want to. I was hoping somebody else would, and that's the choice in how I perceive something is very important. If I set out the conversation to perceive something based off of just my own desires and ideology, and I'm closed off to anything else, that I have just as much responsibility to the success of a conversation in being on the receiving end of the conversation than initiating the conversation. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, Samantha and Catherine and Karen. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Christina. Just the whole aspect of, it's all in how you receive it, because realistically, this whole thing about being politically correct was stemmed from the fact that people would take things the wrong way. I mean, a lot of it is, in how it's meant when it's said, but at the same time, I think a lot of it is just because people were taking things in a negative connotation, even when it wasn't meant that way, and it's like it makes it so much harder to communicate with people when you don't know what they're going to think about what you say. I mean, you could say something as simple as, okay, and I'll use you as an example, Christina. If I were to go to, a friend and you were with me and I said something like, hi, this is Christina. She's my Black friend. You can take that completely the wrong way. Like, what? You're singling me out because I'm Black? Like, if there's something up with me, you know what I'm saying? And yet I'd be like, who knows what I would be thinking when I said it, but it probably would not have the same meaning that you took it as, right? And so it kind of boils down to, I feel like we're so sensitive in so many different ways about what other people are saying, all because of the random thoughts that are going through our own minds on that. And if we all would just work more towards following the teachings we learned in How to Win Friends and Influence People, and have a more positive communication with each other all the way around, then this thing about political correctness would be irrelevant. I mean, that's my opinion.
See, that just, my girl, Samantha, that's a good point. You hit it. Like, now we going there, y'all. Now we going there. Because I think, to your point, that there's at the core of everything is like what your intentions are, right? For me, when I'm in a conversation, and this is part of my prescription, I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to come out and start doing some live casts on this, but this is part of my description or prescription for everybody communicating in a more effective way. And that's literally at the core of it. I want to treat everybody the way I want to be treated, right? So when I go into a conversation, my intention isn't to prove somebody right or wrong. It isn't to make you believe my thoughts over yours. Literally, I'm just seeking understanding. I'm trying to seek understanding from your perspective, and everybody's either black or white. So many people are just black or white, and I tend to live in the gray. And if there's a fault in my character, I suppose that's one of them. I really do tend to live in the gray because I do think that there's so many perceptions and experiences. You and I, we have so many different experiences that we can be dealing in the same situation and we can perceive it completely different based off of our experiences, based off of our childhood teachings, based off of so many shit. It's hot today and I can't stand the heat, right? Like, there's so many things that can come to play. So at the root of it, I try to give people that respect that I would want them to have. So I give them the benefit of the doubt because I want them to give me the benefit of the doubt. So like the scenario that you just pointed out, Samantha, and I've actually been in that situation because, well, I live in Northeast Tennessee and there's not very many people that look like me. So, you know, I'm often like the only Black person there, right? And so and even when I'm, you know, in my office at work, if there is a new Black person at work, then we basically describe, hey, did you see that new Black guy down on the second floor? Like, because this is the quickest way to get to it, okay? There ain't but 5 of us there. We know, hey, that's the new one, okay? So, but people do get offended by that, and I understand it. But in that very situation, I'll be like, all right, so let me just ask, now, were we just describing me as a Black person, your Black friend, because you don't have any? But what is it, baby girl? Like, why am I the Black girl? Let's talk about it. And then I would literally reach my hand out to the person and be like, hey, Christina here, so that they would understand. I would bring the levity into the conversation, and then I would greet that person and make them feel welcome and secure to have the conversation, you know, rather than to make it an attack situation.
You know, I like that we were talking about that new Black person in your office or whatever, but I'm like, you know, we do the same thing with other people. You know, that blonde chick, that bimbo. Now, I know you say bimbo, but you know, you have that connotation that when you say blonde, you think bimbo. You know, that's kind of one of those things, or the ditzy blonde or whatever. But we do it with all kinds of different. You know, it's not just Black or white or, you know, Hispanic or whatever. It's with so many things. And I think that, you know, most of the time there is no ill will being, you know, coming from behind those things. It's just a descriptive term of trying to, you know, talk. We're speaking of this one particular person, and the fastest way to describe that person is this when there's all these other people around. I mean, you know, if there was one person who was blonde and everybody else had dark hair, it'd be blonde, right? If it was one person who was, you know, really, really short and everybody else was tall, it'd be, you know, that short guy over there, you know. But I think it's all in the matter of how you take things. And that's what, you know, that's one of the reasons that we do these hangouts, is because we talk about these topics where we discuss you know, our internal dialogue and what we think and feel and how we all have different perspectives on things. So I wanted to thank you, Christina, for writing this blog post. This is very insightful, and you brought up some really awesome stuff. It's particularly the story about the Hatfields and the McCoys. You know, I thought that was a good scenario with this verse because of the whole aspect of, you know, they don't even remember what the heck the fight started out as. And yet then for generations, they're at each other's throats over it. Just, you know, it's like the verse talking about, you know, where the battlefield or where the army is, there's, you know, there's no, there's no production in the fields or whatever. And so I think that's a key thing there, is just the fact that if we are always attuned to being negative, we can't grow anything positive.
And we do take things from a very selfish perspective, how it's affecting me. You know, there's that saying in politics, all politics is local, right? How it's affecting me. And we're just very unreasonable. Human beings are just unreasonable. The notion that anything can be 100% perfect for one group or another is just beyond me. There's unintended consequences pretty much to any and every situation, right? And there's sometimes, for example, that a law is passed to fix this issue, right? And in order to get it passed, somebody threw on some amendments that appeased them. There's really no way to be able to tell that 10 years down the road, that's going to be massively horrible for most people. Why? Because we didn't know the global economy was going to be like this. We didn't understand that there were going to be how many natural disasters. Nobody understood that the population of that would flip in such a different way. I mean, there's so many things that plays into it, and we're just the most unreasonable species. It just is. Can you tell that I'm just annoyed right now? I'm just frustrated with all this right now.
I can, Christina. Welcome, Rhonda. Good to have you on. Catherine, I think you were going to jump out.
Well, I wanted to welcome Rhonda, and you can unmute yourself and turn your video on and off in the lower left corner. When you mouse down over the lower left corner, you'll see a little menu thing pop up there. So thank you for joining us. Yeah, I'm not very politically correct myself, but I think it's absolutely the way people take things. And I've had a beautiful example of this all week long because with some business stuff, I needed to sort of alert many people to something. And the difference in the reaction that I got from each person was like so incredibly different. I mean, there was sort of like the people that were, okay, thanks. And then there were people that just like went off, you know, and I'm like, holy smokes, you know, so it all depends. That's why work like this and mindset work is so important, because we need to, as you go through work like this, those triggers go away. Because what happens is these people, they're being triggered by something that happened in the past, or, you know, it's all perception, like you said. But we can change our perception. You know, you can change the way that you look at things. You can take that step back and learning how to communicate. I love Zoom because it's difficult, I think, for people to communicate through the little chats. I mean, I know chats are great and I love them, like on Facebook or whatever, but you can't, like, sometimes the intonation is lost somewhere. You know, at least when you're looking at somebody, you can feel them out better. I think we're really going to have to learn how to communicate through our hearts. I mean, people, I agree with you, Christina. I think people are very unreasonable to think that anybody can please anybody all of the time, much less everybody all of the time. I mean, it's crazy. And people have all these expectations, and expectations can really be the big B word sometimes. Oh,
do we lose
I
Catherine?
think we lost her.
Oops.
Oh, she-
Sorry.
You good?
Yeah. Sometimes my internet will drop like that. Sorry. Yeah. The expectations can just do people in. I mean, once again, we're living in this world where people just want things like instantaneously and based on their expectations of what's about to happen, you know, and then they're pissed when it doesn't, or whatever. So as for this verse being perfect for this, you know, everything going on in the world, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. And it's interesting, and I do this too, so I'm speaking to myself here, but it's interesting to watch how many people are fighting to try to stop the fighting, if that makes any sense, you know, and it doesn't make sense because it's that fighting energy. And where in this verse they talk about how the land is decimated after a war like that, and it is, and it's the vibration, it's the energy of the land. People who are sensitive to energy, like I can walk on the land and feel the vibration in the land, and you can see just from the lack of vegetation and stuff. It's really, we're going to have to learn how to live in a different way and learn how to communicate from our heart, where people can tell if we're being genuine or not, or if we're just running an agenda because it's something that, you know, the McCoys told us.
Yeah, I would say too that trying to figure out which topic I want to kind of introduce into this conversation. Would you guys agree that again, I think I live in the gray, right? So yeah, there's a whole issue with perception. There's also, for me, a very big issue with the lack of willingness to see what exists. You know, I can't. I'm telling you, I have to stay off the Facebook news feeds for some. Like, I have to get to the point where, okay, like, and this is what I was saying in my blog post. I think it's important for me to be informed, and there's so many different mediums to be informed. I can't just rely on the one-to-one or the one-to-many in-person contact. Especially in a world where not many people are in person communicating. Most people are, chasing Pikachu anymore. So I don't understand this Pokemon Go stuff, by the way. But so I think that it's my responsibility to engage in the news, and not just engage in the news that feeds my ideology. I'm a very centrist-minded kind of person. I feel like the extremes on both sides in politics are the reason why we're so screwed up today, as far as our government in the U.S. anyway. Well, hell, even around the world. I think about Brexit and everything, and it's the extremes pushing against the middle that is just messing everything up, in my personal opinion. That said, there is a lack of compassion and willingness to do the work and to have the hard conversations. Another one of my prescriptions for healing is for us to have the tough conversations. I make it my business every day to have a discussion with someone that is difficult and uncomfortable for both me and for them. And the reason that I make it my business to do that is because I got to understand another person's perspective in this world in order to be compassionate towards it. If I don't know it exists, then how the hell can I be compassionate towards it? Not to mention, we don't have enough understanding. It's quite hard for you to hate me. It's quite hard for you to wish ill will on me. It's quite hard for you to be unwilling to hear me when you know my heart, when you understand my intentions, when you walk along with my experience. How can that be done without us having communications? Right? So I have the tough conversations every day, which is not really hard for me because, quite honestly, in the area that I live in, the only way I'm going to have a conversation is to have tough ones because, quite honestly, mindsets are very narrow and closed. So it's easy for me, but I intentionally engage them and start them. And I'm not starting them with the notion of trying to be right or wrong or flip their mindset. Only thing that I'm trying to turn on in them is the willingness to understand that there is another perspective, and there's a responsibility to respect that perspective. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it. Like, you don't have to want it. But if you understand that one exists and you're willing to engage in it enough. So I try to have these conversations so that I can create secure zone, so that in someone's mind, there's a bookmark. Next time they leave the conversation with me, next time that they engage someone else, and someone else wants to have that conversation, or maybe they see someone different than them, they remember, I had a very uncomfortable conversation with that chick, Christina, but it turned out pretty cool. Like, she didn't get angry, I didn't get angry, and I learned a couple things. I'm curious about this other person. I'm willing to engage them in conversation. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I want to give Rhonda and Karen an opportunity. If you guys, either one of you, want to jump out and add your thoughts, feel free to unmute yourself. I know we sometimes tend to just dominate the conversation, but we want to hear what you have to say too.
Well, this is Karen, and I really appreciate that. I've been holding back a little bit because I've got kind of a what I call a whang off. I'm kind of whanging off in a little bit different direction. And it's coming from, I don't know exactly how many, I can't even think of the name of it, but, the Tao Te Ching has been reprocessed, whatever, so many times. And sometimes I have felt in some of the different verses that I really was missing something, and so I've kind of gotten in the habit of checking a couple of these other sources, and there's always different words. And so I'm going to share a couple of those with you, but before I do that, I need to tell you that I'm probably behind the rest of you in life. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's happened to me, but as I look at my growth and mindset and personal development and so forth, and I look at areas where I've especially worked for a long time and not really gotten anywhere, I've been noticing lately that the message seems to be that that we have lots of selves within ourselves. And so keeping that in mind, I'm looking at one interpretation that has right after the first line, whenever you would advise a ruler in the way of the Tao, and that sounds like the way ours started, but it then says, counsel him not to use force to conquer the universe, for this would only cause resistance. And for years following Abraham Hicks, I've been trying to figure out what in the heck she's talking about when she says, if you would only not do what you do, or stop doing what you're doing, or whatever. And I think, oh, tell me what I'm doing. And I realized that she probably did just about every time, and I just couldn't. You know how sometimes you can't hear things? And so now I think I'm kind of ready to hear some of this stuff, and I'm really picking up on that I have a lot of internal resistance, that what I do that I need to stop doing somehow, and I don't know how to do it. It's kind of like Christina's frustration with the things that we've talked about earlier. How do you do that? So how do I stop resisting this force? And if I think about the many selves that I have, I have recently studied some of Dr. Hugh Lin's Ho'oponopono. I can't ever say that without going, let's see, now it's spelled like this. Okay. But I did follow through with his work with the inner child. And I've tried to deal with my inner child for like 40 years, and never could see the little booger. I mean, I do think there's a booger for every year that you are. Like, I have a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old and a 16-year-old and all that. But with his help, I've been able to literally see one of my inner children, and beg apology for all these years of abandonment and not paying attention. So then the next thing, and I follow this one. No, that's not true. So the next one, this is kind of midway through. He says, he understands that the universe is forever out of his control, and that trying to dominate events goes against the current of the Tao. And I'm picking up on that the universe, and I would be so interested to know if there's anybody besides me who thought the universe was planets and dark space, but lately trying to get a little bit better grasp of what we're talking about when we say, I asked the universe for $250,000. Thanks, Christina. And the universe is our reality. So if we understand that our reality is forever out of our control, and that we can't dominate events, or if we do, it goes against the current of the Tao. And then there's a Scandinavian fellow that I just adore, and it's just because I have Scandinavian background. It's not that he gives a crap about me, but anyway, uh, kind of in the middle of his thing, it says they do not dare to rely on force, and that hit me like a ton of bricks because I hated being a child, and I'm not particularly fond of children. I mean, I have two sons, and I was fond enough of them, fortunately. But you know, as far as I was concerned, we didn't need to have the rest of the neighborhood over because I really didn't care for those guys. Uh, and so I know with these inner children that I have tended to rely on force. You know, like squelch it, shut up, don't say anything, go away. So anyway, so I don't know. You can ignore all my comments if you want to. Thanks.
No, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, in the sense that if you just think about inner children, an inner child in general, the childlike state means that your super ego is like on steroids most of the time, right? You kind of want what you want when you want it. And from that perspective, or thinking of it from that perspective, I don't know if I'm on your path or not. I can certainly see how that dominates behavior, because it's all about me and what I want. I'm not willing to hear or listen or receive any other perspective if I'm in that mindset.
Oh, thank you, Karen. I like the fact that you brought out a whole different way of looking at this verse and what we're actually talking about here. And of course, you know, Christina talks about it on the world and political plane and having those difficult conversations. And then you bring up the aspect of this inner world that we try and force to make changes upon, and we have this inner resistance. So I think that was wonderful that you brought up that aspect. Thank you, Karen. And I'm right there with you. I mean, we all have that inner self that we work to curb the things that are causing us issues in our lives, and we work to encourage the things that are working to help us better our lives. So thank you. And I just wanted to welcome real quick. We have another caller jump on. It doesn't show your name, but it shows a 847 area code. I don't know who that is, but if you'd like to jump out, feel free to hit *6 and you'll be able to unmute yourself if you want to add to the conversation. And or Rhonda, if you'd like to jump out and add thoughts too, whenever you are ready. Jump out, caller.
Yeah. Hi, this is Chris. Good morning, everybody. I haven't figured out how to use my phone to get on video with Zoom yet.
Morning.
Glad you made it on, Chris.
All right, glad to be here. Thanks.
Did you want to add something to the conversation, Chris?
No, I'm just enjoying it.
Okay.
If I have some thoughts, I'll let you. I'll speak when I think of something. I'm enjoying it so far. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Chris. Did you want to jump out real quick, Rhonda, since you've been on for a little bit? Did you want to add your thoughts? Nope. Yep. Go for it. I can't hear you if you're trying to talk. It looks like you're unmuted.
I unmuted her because I didn't know if she knew how. She may not want to talk.
Okay, and that's fine too. That's fine. If you don't want to add, that's perfectly fine. You're welcome to just listen in, and it's up to you if you'd like to.
I'll jump out real quick. I was thinking.
Were you going to throw out something, Jason?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Okay, well, just what I guess it was Rhonda was speaking.
Are y'all hearing Jason? Because I'm not hearing him.
We hear you, Jason. Jump out.
Can you hear me okay? All right. Yeah, in regards to what I believe Rhonda was saying, I like how she was thinking. There are different levels to this. And when they talk about universe, you can kind of condense your ideas of what the universe is, or you can really open your mind as to and see the universe as encompassing everything. So and what I was thinking of is, they talk about the battlefield here, but what if we think of the battlefield as just the arena of our communication? Not necessarily a big battlefield out, where a war is happening, but some conversations can actually seem like a battlefield. And it's interesting that certain topics, like if you even bring up a certain topic, and even if you're not biased one way or the other, but you just want to kind of talk about it, you will get the sense that other people are already ready to battle. They're already engaged and ready to battle. And and I found it interesting that in the verse they talk about how the battle decimates the land and all that. And how many times have you been in a conversation, maybe not even a big heated conversation, but just maybe a little discrepancy with someone, and then after that it seems like now there's a different air, a different maybe a negative vibe in the air for a while afterwards, until maybe you come and say, hey, I just want to make sure that everything's okay, everything's good, until you clear the air, so to speak. So even in our communications, we can sort of decimate the battlefield, if we're not perceived in the correct way. So I think as the communicator, and we also have to understand that the receiver, it may not be receiving it the same way we're trying to communicate it. And well, if we if we are aware of this, and we sort of set things up in advance to, we can set things up in a way to say, hey, please don't take this the wrong way. I was just having a thought about this. What do you think? And leaving the conversation with an idea that we have heard what they had to say. And then when they talk about not trying to conquer the universe, then in how do we try to not conquer this conversation? We don't try to beat our main idea into their head and be like, do you understand me? Do you hear me? We might be looking for a certain response from them, but if we don't get that response, we need to be okay with it. We need to kind of just put it out there and then let them accept it as they can accept it, because we can't always control that part of the universe. And I think to do that, or to be so attached to ideas, either as the communicator or as the receiver, if we're so attached to these ideas, then that causes a problem, because I believe what the Tao speaks of is that these ideas are not us. These ideas are not our spirit. And maybe Catherine can speak in a little bit more about that. But the idea basically is that, these ideas were given to us as we were living through this lifetime, and they were initially not even our own, possibly. So, if we take a look at that, we might see that these, we might see even more so that these ideas aren't us, and that we can appreciate ourselves outside of these ideas, or at a core where these ideas are just something that we've maybe kind of brought into our lives, and this is something we agree with, but they, that they aren't our spirit. So we don't have to hold on to them so tightly, but maybe Catherine could speak on to, ideas about our, how this isn't our spirit, and our ego sometimes wants us to hold on to these ideas because we've become so familiar with them. What do you think?
Saying that like it's just kind of like floating in the air, and then there's like a magnetic force, and it just kind of hops on us and attracts us? I'm trying to understand.
Well, the ideas, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing I was learned from one of the previous books we were discussing, what to say when you think, what to say when you talk to yourself. the way they broke that down into, well, they broke it down into our programmings causing us to have certain beliefs, and then giving us these attitudes that create the feelings, and then ultimately our actions. And so what took me back when we were studying that is something that a lot of times that self-management process happens so quickly, we don't even know where it comes from. We don't know where these attitudes come from, this programming. But we as humans, what I've learned, what I've heard other people talk about, is that we are very drawn to just the familiarity of it. So if we get an idea or an image pops into our head, we automatically have a familiar image or a familiar feeling or attitude about it. And then that causes us to react a certain way. If maybe it's just a mannerism or something we might do, maybe a face we might, grimace, or maybe make us happy, whatever it might be. But that attitude and that is not the essence of the idea. That is just our reaction to it. It's also not our spirit. It's of the flesh. So I don't know, I guess it's kind of getting deep, but it's, when I love the way that they broke it down into where you can start asking yourselves questions about the things the issues you want to deal with. You can break it back down by asking yourself, why do I feel this way? And then listen, and then why do I feel that? And then listen, and why do I feel that? And get down to the programming. And then you can say, well, and then you could tweak the programming and say, well, I used to believe that, but maybe it's a little bit different. So now I can have a little bit different belief based on a slightly different program that I've actually put into my thought process, rather than just growing up and having people, inundate things and making me have to pick and choose, rather than really thinking about it, So I'll stop and let you guys talk. So, but I'd be interested to hear if you guys have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. Self-inquiry, I think, is probably the answer to peace on earth. If everybody would just do self-inquiry and figure out why they react the way that they react. I loved what Karen said about the inner child, how she has a 1-year-old and a 16-year-old. We pretty much all have however many lives years we have that many lives that we've lived, and even multiply that by, the thousands or whatever, because each moment is almost a life in itself sometimes. If we can learn to pull back, if we can recognize who's reacting, which kid, which year that is that's reacting. A lot of times it's, under 10 years of age even that we're coming from, which is sad when you think about it. That here we are, grown adults, and trying to manage all these things, and we still react from that 6 or 7-year-old standpoint on some things. And I do it too. I'm not, like, I always speak to myself more than anybody, because the thing is, though, I've learned how to catch it. Like I see it, and then I'm like, I see what you're doing there, Get back in the corner. No, I'm kidding. But we react instead of actually responding. When you respond to something, you're kind of choosing where you're coming from. When you react to something, it's just, there's not a lot of thought processes. It's just that fight or flight that kind of kicks in there, and you feel like you have to defend your position, or you're going to kick and scream and spin around in circles on the floor until you get your way, And then there's some of us that wouldn't dare do that because we knew we'd get our beat, So people do. We come from different experiences, and this is why the cycle of abuse continues. unfortunately. You know, this is why the cycle of war continues. And I'm really, I just wish we could learn from history instead of repeating it. It seems like we just repeat, and I don't know if it's something to do with this circular time, because I don't think I truly grasp time, but as who we are, as the spirit beings that we are, it just seems ridiculous. Some of the happenings that go on in the world, you know, and yet it isn't a reflection of what's going on inside of us, you know, as humans dealing with some of all the tragedies and the things going on, and just trying to feel safe from a personal standpoint as a human on this earth when things are going crazy. But if you can pull back out of that humanness and look at it from the larger viewpoint, I mean, time does seem to circulate. We see everything coming and going in these periods of time, and I pray that one day enough people will do the self-inquiry and be able to pull back enough and to be able to respond and communicate instead of react. And I think one of the biggest things that contributes to that too is the disparity between people who have so much and people who have so little. You know, as long as people are kept in poverty by lack of education and control of media and all of these different ways that we keep people pushed down, as long as there's that much poverty going on, people are going to be on a survival mode, you know, and they are going to react instead of respond. They're not going to, you can't tell somebody who's starving in the middle of a war zone to just think about the positive stuff. You know, I mean, it's really very, very condescending and very extremely hurtful to tell somebody who's really suffering, this is all a video game. I mean, yeah, you can look at it like that when you really pull out and you can try to console yourself when some shit's going wrong with that kind of talk. But when it really comes down to true suffering, we need to communicate from the heart and have compassion there and know that this is real shit going on, you know. Yeah, it maybe we all agreed to it. Maybe, you know, it's all happening so that we learn how to have more compassion. I mean, I can see the lessons in all of it. That doesn't make it easier to live through. Being human is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I've got a meme that says that, and I totally believe it, you know. But I also believe that we come here voluntarily to experience these things and these, you know, all of these different experiences. So, yeah, there needs to be hard conversations, Christina, because it seems that people are taking this, some people are just, and very spiritual people are saying, well, you just can't look at that stuff. You can't focus on it because that just brings about more of it. And they're turning a blind eye to suffering. And I don't think that that is what all of this is happening for. I think it's all happening so that we finally get that we need to reach out and help each other.
Preach, girl, preach.
Sorry.
You on my soapbox, Catherine, now.
Come on in.
Well, we're coming up on the top of the hour, so I'll go ahead and I have so many thoughts going through my head. Man, I wish we had more time. Jason, to what you were saying a minute ago, you know, one thing that I learned reading that Pay Me What I'm Worth book and going through that course is really, truly giving the notion that there's freedom of choice. I have freedom of choice. You have freedom of choice. And that goes a long way in our communications. You said something about having the conversation about, you know, asking the question. And in fact, that's how I have my tough conversations. I start them off with question because it's all in the presentation, right? And when you start something out with question, then it feels like on the receiving end, oh, you care. You care to know. You care to understand. You're curious. I'm open to that. We love to talk about us anyway, right? So I entered into a conversation with that notion in mind, that there's freedom of choice. And so if I say something and someone gets all up in their feelings about it, I know my intention was not for them to be up in their feelings. They can choose to get up in their feelings, or they can choose to have the conversation. Somebody says something to me that I'm not feeling, that I don't like, that hurts my feelings, pisses me off, whatever, then I have the choice to be like, hold up, now, wait a minute. I just need you to understand that this is how I received that. I'm open to the fact that I could have received it wrong, but I certainly am giving you the benefit of the doubt, curious what you meant by that, right? So for me, in what you were saying about starting the conversation off with, don't take this in any offense. Off the top, that's automatically putting someone, in my opinion, in a defensive stature. They're not going to receive, because they're bracing themselves for some shit to come, right? And so they're not going to be able to receive what you're saying. This is just my opinion, my experience. And having tough conversations like what we've got going on in the United States with Black Lives Matter and the police and da-da-da-da. Again, I live in Northeast Tennessee, so most of my friends are very narrow in their experience. They're white, and they have a lot of preconceived notions about Black people in general. And most of them are very backward, stupid, and incorrect. Now, if I go into this with this notion that I'm going to, be like, don't take offense by this, but I feel like da-da-da, they're already going to stand on their stance. But the reason that I'm able to have the tough conversations is because I give them the benefit of the doubt. And I have these conversations, and literally when I'm having these conversations, I've literally learned so many people are afraid of their own experience or their own history. I have a lot of friends who don't even recognize institutional racism and things. It's not because they're racist people. I personally feel like they do need to take responsibility for their unwillingness to engage in it and recognize it. But it's because literally they are so disgusted with the own history of their ancestry that they don't want it. They can't bring themselves to dive into that because they don't personally feel that way. And it hurts them that it ever existed. And it hurts them that it still exists today, and they feel helpless to it. Some people are just quite ignorant, and they do have racist tendencies. Other people, I have Black friends who, even my own self, I have to work every day at not allowing my personal experience with racism in my past to dictate how I act today or with you or with the next person. I guess what I'm trying to say is that in the suggestion of don't take this personally, that automatically implies to me an intention state for both you and the person receiving it. And I would just ask that everybody in the audience, consider that and think about it, because it certainly does make a difference in how well the conversation can go.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point, because even when someone does that to me, I'm already thinking, okay, what are they going to say? Am I going to react the wrong way, or am I going to take it personal? Because you're suggesting it. You can light it up a little bit, like what you said, by asking them questions, or just saying, hey, not taking it personally, but don't take this the wrong way. I'm feeling, this, or it kind of puts people on guard, but it also lets them know that you're considerate of their feelings. It's just something you need to speak about. Now your reaction to that is your own filters, and that's you as a receiver of that. That should put you on guard and say, hey, maybe I've got some filters that are keeping me from hearing what the person is saying, even though they're trying to be considerate of my feelings. I'm caught up on something's going to offend me. Something he's going to say is going to offend me. Something, and we need to let all that go, And I'd like to take it down from being so, heavy talk about like politics and the worldviews right now, but even just getting on a conference call like this. People might have their own filters that they're viewing that through. They're like, they want to be on the conference call, but they have a filter that, oh no, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. Something negative maybe from their past experience. Maybe they were in an improv show and they were embarrassed or something, and now they don't want to get out in front of people. But whatever it might be, we need to realize that we do have these filters. Everybody has these filters that we put up. They sometimes are good and help us. Sometimes they're bad and keep us from hearing what needs to be said. And I'd like to encourage anybody who has a filter that's keeping them from being on a conversation like this to just, understand that it's not serving you well. Hop on out, get into the discussion. It'll really open yourself up. It'll make you, it'll let you see that, things aren't always as they might be perceived from the beginning. And I think you'll have a good time if you come out here and you get on the call with us and start communicating with us, because we all have a good time. So it's great to be on here. I really love you guys, and I'm looking forward to the next conversation as well. So have a great weekend.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Christina. Rhonda, did you want to jump out for a moment and share your thoughts?
Yeah, hi everyone. I just wanted to say this is absolutely brilliant. I've got a few of those little niggly little things that go on in your little brain box that sort of pass, and then you try to put things right. Talk about a learning curve that we all seem to go on a daily basis, especially when you sort of hear basically that what you're doing now is all related to what you've picked up before you were even born. To get your head around a lot of it, I must admit, is absolutely mind-blowing. But yeah, everyone here is absolutely brilliant. I will apologise for not being on a lot sooner. I've recently had heart surgery back in February and still got complications. But I just had to come on tonight, or today rather. You're in the morning, I'm in the afternoon. But it's absolutely brilliant. And I'd like to say to each and every one of you, thanks very much. Because obviously without your inputs, and that's a lot of it, I must admit, was I had to sort of reset my mind, I suppose you could say, and get back on track again, because I'd lost my way. And watching your recordings recently, and that have really been of great inspiration to me and a great help. So I would like to say personally to all and each and every single one of you, thank you, and just carry on with the great work. It's absolutely brilliant. But that's all I'd like to say, but carry on.
Thanks, Rhonda. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We're glad to have you on here, and we hope that we'll see you again on another visit or another week. And from now on, it'll be great. And Karen, did you want to add anything else, final thoughts before we wrap up today?
Thank you. I've been thinking through the whole thing about an article that I read in the New Yorker about a woman who scratched through her skull and into her brain with an itch. Is that anything that anybody else had read? It was fascinating, but the thing that fascinated me most was at the end, because they had realized that there's new information about how it is that we form our perceptions. And there's about 3 keywords I'd like to think of right now, and I can't. But I want to go back and read that over and study it and understand it, because I think all these things that we do in the way of self-development and self-growth and inquiry, as Catherine was saying, are things that help us to be more secure. And earlier somebody was saying, how people, look to be secure in the world. For me, this Saturday morning gathering is really steadying because of the authenticity and the just the genuine realness of everyone sharing. And I too thank you a lot. And I'm thrilled with this Zoom situation here. After I lose about another 180 pounds. Actually, I had four days of diarrhea this week, and I thought by all rights I should weigh 110 pounds. Didn't work like that at all. So let's all go out and have a good week. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing, Karen. We're glad to have you on here too. And thank you to everybody. Catherine, did you share your final thoughts already?
I just want to say thank you so much. It's such a joy. I love the Zoom. I'm glad we switched to it. I'm so thrilled to have your input and be able to see you or hear you at least. And this Saturday morning means so much to me as well. And I'm just thankful to be here with this group of friends and be able to truly communicate from the heart with people. You know, we may not be able to fix the whole world, but we can fix ourselves, if you want to think of it that way. You know, we can better our communication skills with each other here, and then that flows out all around us to all the people that we touch too. So, and of course, people that watch the replay. So thank you so much, everybody. Have an awesome week. It was a great discussion today. I love you guys.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Thank you so very much. I'm glad to have you on our Saturday morning mastermind. And to everybody who's out there watching the replay, if you'd like to join us anytime, we always meet at 10 a.m. Eastern. SaturdayMorningMastermind.com is where you can find our blog post of the week. It usually gets updated about the middle of the week for the following Saturday. And then on our blog, you can also get the information on how to join into the meeting, the conference room, if you go to zoom.SaturdayMorningMastermind.com. So with that, have a great, awesome, amazing weekend, and we'll see you all next week on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. Bye for now.